If you're taking the LSAT in August or September, you're not late, you're not rushing, you're actually early. You're in the best position possible, and I'll explain exactly why. Law school admissions isn't a free-for-all. It's not a lottery. It's a business process with a timeline. And if you understand that timeline, if you know where to insert yourself, you can tilt everything in your favor. Not just your chances of getting in, but also how much money they're going to offer you when they accept you. Here's how it works behind the scenes. Law schools open their applications in September. That's when they start reviewing files. They've got full budgets at that time, and they've got empty classes to fill. And every dean, every admissions officer is thinking the same thing. Let's get a strong early batch. Early applicants are the ones who set the benchmark for everybody else who comes later. Those early numbers, the LSAT scores, the GPAs, the resumes, they shape the curve for the rest of the entire cycle. So if your LSAT score is ready and your application is polished when the doors open, you're not just another file in the stack. You're going to be one of the first files they see, and you become the standard everyone else is compared to. So let's take that one step further. Imagine that you're an admissions officer. It's early in the cycle. You're reading the first few applications. You see a strong LSAT score, a compelling personal statement, and a resume that shows real potential. What do? You move fast. You give them an early admit. You consider a scholarship offer. Why? Because you want that person in your class. They're going to make your stats look good, and that makes your job easier. You don't wait around to see if someone better comes along in January. You act now. Now contrast that with someone who applies in February. At that point, the admissions team is beyond overwhelmed. They're getting hundreds of applications a week, and they've already filled a chunk of the class. They've already spent a significant portion of their scholarship budget, and they're tired. At that point, they're scanning for red flags and looking for excuses to ding people. They're not looking for potential at that stage. So even if your numbers are solid, you're at a disadvantage. You're late, you're getting buried with all the other applications, and even if they want to admit you, they might not have room anymore, or the money to give you scholarships, or the time to give you much attention. That's why August and September LSAT dates are so strategic. They give you the power of applying early. You're not scrambling at the last minute. You're setting yourself up to hit submit the day applications open or a few weeks after with a real score, a real application, and a real chance to stand out. Now, to be clear, just taking the LSAT in August or September is not a magic bullet. Timing helps, but only if you use that timing well. So what I'm really saying is this. You've already made a smart decision by choosing one of these test dates. You gave yourself time to study, to retake it if needed, and to apply early. And that alone puts you ahead of thousands of people who won't even start thinking about their applications until the holidays. So don't waste that time. Don't tell yourself, I'll figure it out later. Use this time and use it aggressively. Because law school isn't just about getting in, it's about getting in on your terms, with options, with leverage, with money on the table. And starting early with an August or September LSAT is how you create those options. That's the real opportunity sitting in front of you right now. Now, as I said, just taking the LSAT in August or September doesn't guarantee anything. A lot of students hear early is better and assume that just showing up early gets them results, but it doesn't. Early with a weak score is still weak, and early with a half-baked application is still sloppy. And that's where most people screw it up. They coast. They say to themselves, cool, I'm taking it early. I'm ahead of the game. But they don't actually study hard. They don't have a clear strategy. And they don't use the extra time to give it their all when it comes to the LSAT. And they end up squandering the very advantage they thought they had. Think of it like this. Imagine you show up to a job interview early, but you haven't prepared for the interview. You're the first one in the door, but your resume is a mess and you have no idea what the company even does. Does being early help you? Of course not. It makes it worse, because now your lack of preparation is front and center. You don't just look unqualified, you look unqualified and rushed. Same thing with the LSAT. Of course, being early can give you leverage, but only if your numbers are strong enough to take advantage of it. Law schools are watching those early applicants closely. The first batch is like the foundation of their class. As I said, those early admits set the tone for the rest of the cycle, so they're more careful at that stage. They're more thoughtful. And if you're good, they will move fast to admit you and lock you in. But if you're not ready, if your LSAT score is shaky, it's below the medians, then they're going to wait. They're going to hit pause. They might not say no right away, but they'll delay. They'll put your file on hold and say, let's see who else comes in. And that's not what you want. You don't want to be the applicant who shows up first, only to be set aside until January. You want to be the one they look at and say, let's grab this person now before another school does. Let me break this down even more clearly. There are really 3 types of LSAT takers in this situation. The first are the ones who are early and strong. These are the ones who take it in August or September, get a great score, and send in a polished application right when the cycle opens. They're the ones who get in fast, often with significant scholarship money, maybe even a full ride. The second category are those who are early but unprepared. They take the LSAT early, but they didn't study enough, or they score okay, but not great, or they wait too long to work on their application essays. They technically applied early, but they're not standing out, so their applications get delayed or ignored entirely. The third category are the students who are late and scrambling. These students take it in January, February, or April, and by the time they get their scores back and finalize their essays, it's already the end of the cycle, the class is already mostly full, the scholarship budget is mostly spent, and their chances drop even if they have a good score. So, which one do you want to be? Because if you're taking the LSAT in August or September, you already have the opportunity to be in the first group, the applicants who have leverage, the ones who have time, the ones who get read carefully, not skimmed, the ones who get real offers, not get waitlisted. But that only happens if you back it up with action now. So if your test is coming up, if you are taking it in August or September, it's time to go all in on your prep. And if your score isn't where you want it to be yet, now's the time to fix that, not later. Because schools don't just want you applying early, they want you applying early with scores above their medians. That's how you get their attention, and that's how you control the outcome. Don't waste the advantage that you have. Most people do, but you don't have to. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. The LSAT has changed, and not in a small technical way. This is not some minor tweak to question wording or how they score the writing sample. This is a fundamental shift in how the test works, and it affects everything about how you should study, how you approach test day, and how you think about your prep strategy. Logic games are off the test completely. For decades, the logic games was one of the biggest challenges on the LSAT. It was time-consuming, unfamiliar, and for a lot of students, it was just plain confusing. But now it is off the test entirely. Some people were great at games and loved the structure, others dreaded it, but now it's not even part of the equation. Now you've got 2 scored sections of logical reasoning, 1 scored section of reading comp, and 1 unscored extra section of either reasoning or reading comp. That's it. Now, let's talk about what that really means and why it changes the game for everyone, including you. First, of course, the most obvious impact is that 100% of your score comes from just 2 skill areas, arguments and reading. That is massive. Before, if you were weak in one area, you could sometimes compensate with strength in another. Maybe you bombed reading comp, but you crushed games and reasoning. Now there's no buffer, no balancing act, just 2 skills and both of them have to be sharp. Let me be even more direct here. If you are not excellent at logical reasoning and reading comp, your score will suffer no matter how hard you work or how early you apply. But the good news is, this change also simplifies your prep. You don't need to split your attention across 3 very different skill sets anymore. You don't need to learn how to diagram scenarios for rare game types that may or may not even show up on your test. You can go deep, really deep, in just 2 areas: how to analyze arguments and how to extract meaning from dense text under time pressure. That is it. Now, let's not mistake simpler for easier, because these two areas are hard for a lot of students. Logical reasoning is full of traps, and reading comp, of course, has brutal passages on topics you would never choose to read on your own. And now that each section carries more weight, you have less margin for error. If you mess up a handful of logical reasoning questions, that's 2/3 of your score taking a hit. If you zone out halfway through a tough reading comp passage, you just lost 6 or maybe 7 questions in a row. So yes, the test is shorter, but it's more intense. The pressure is higher, and the stakes are more concentrated. But, and this is important, that also makes your strategy more focused. You don't need to master 3 completely different kinds of questions. You don't need to juggle timing strategies for 3 different sections. All your energy can go into spotting flaws in arguments, identifying assumptions, making inferences, recognizing the structures of complex texts, and managing time across predictable question types. That's not just efficient, it's powerful. Because if you're someone who's willing to do focused, high-quality work, this is your moment. Now more than ever, you can train like a specialist. So here's the mindset shift. Stop thinking of the LSAT as a broad, general exam. Start thinking of it as a pressure test on 2 core skills: argument analysis and structured reading. That's what this new format demands. That's what law school demands. And honestly, that's what the legal profession demands also. So yes, the LSAT changed, and yes, that will affect your prep, but it also gives you clarity. It removes distractions. It tells you exactly where to focus. The question now isn't, can I handle the new LSAT? It's, am I willing to double down on what actually matters? If the answer is yes, then you're already ahead of the curve. Because most students are still using old prep plans for a test that doesn't even exist anymore. But not you. Now you know exactly what's changed and why it matters more than ever. Now, your first step should be to take a real diagnostic test and do it right. If you can show me the data, then we can talk about the plan. That's my rule for LSAT prep. And the way you get that data, the way you learn exactly where you stand, is with a proper diagnostic test. Not some quick quiz you found Googling, not a few untimed questions, a full LSAT under test day conditions. Now, let me walk you through exactly how to do it so the results will be meaningful and useful. First, you've got to use LawHub, not some random PDF you found online. LawHub gives you the exact online interface you'll see on test day with the highlighting tools, the flagging feature, and the countdown clock. All of that matters. You also want to choose a relatively recent exam, maybe one of the prep tests numbered 150 to 158, because the LSAT has evolved over time. The stimuli, the writing style, and the difficulty curve all drift over time. The newer tests will give you a true baseline. Then you want to replicate the game day conditions like the timing, the endurance factor, and so you want to block out a couple hours uninterrupted. Tell your roommates, tell your family, I'm off the grid until I'm done. Then you set up your testing station, a computer with a single screen, a scratch paper, pen or pencil, a water bottle, and a quiet room with stable Wi-Fi. Put your phone on airplane mode or put it in another room. Then follow the exact following order. You take 2 sections back to back, each one 35 minutes, assuming standard timing. Then you have a 10-minute break in the middle, then 2 more 35-minute sections, and that's the test. You also want to use LawHub's countdown timer, not your phone. And you want to, at the end of the exam, track more than just whether you got it right or wrong. Quickly mark a confidence grade, A, B, or C. A means you were locked in on that choice, you were totally sure. B means you were pretty sure, maybe 50 to 80% confident. And C was just a wild guess. This just takes 1 second per question, but it gives you valuable data later. Then immediately after the exam, you want to record your raw score, not converted out of 180, just raw out of 75, 76 questions, which will be cleaner to help you spot patterns. Then you want to capture all the timing data while it's still fresh. How many minutes left did you have at the end of the section? Or how many minutes over did you go? Which questions took up the most time? Then take a quick 15-minute mental break, get a drink of water, go for a walk, but don't scroll social media. Let all the stress flush out. Then you want to do your deep dive analysis the same day. Check your answers, but don't just mark X or check. On every wrong question or every one where you guessed, write down why you chose that answer, why the right answer is ultimately better, and what was the trap. Was the choice too strong? Did it reverse the logic, or was it just totally irrelevant? Then log your data in a spreadsheet. After you've done all this, then convert from raw to scaled, but only after you've done your analysis using a technique like the Socratic review method. Then you want to translate your findings into an action plan. If your issue was timing, like you're running out of time on LR, you need pacing drills, maybe 2-minute caps per question, then tighten it up over time. If it's an accuracy problem where you have plenty of time, but you've got a low hit rate, then you drill that question type in isolation. If it's a confidence gap where many of your B-level guesses turned into wrong answers, you need deeper logical certainty, not speed. Whatever your takeaway is, you want to write it into an action state, like I'm going to drill 20 necessary assumption questions daily until my accuracy rate is greater than 80%. Or I'm going to run 8-minute reading comp passage sprints 3 times a week. Then you schedule your second diagnostic on the calendar 4 weeks out. Why? Because to improve, you've got to have a scoreboard, disciplined analysis, and a clear prescription for what comes next. If you do this right, every hour you study after today will have a targeted return on investment. It's not going to just be busy work, and most students never get this granular, but you will, and that alone can separate you from the pack before you even start lesson 1. That's how you begin, and that's how you turn I hope I improve into I know exactly what to face. And now that you've taken a real diagnostic, you probably saw something very clear. Logical reasoning will make or break your score. Not maybe, not sometimes, every single time. Now that logic games is off the test, logical reasoning is 2/3 of your score. So if you want to score 170 or above, if you want full ride scholarships, if you want options, logical reasoning is where you earn it. But the good news is, logical reasoning is the most learnable section of the test. I know it's hard, I know it's dense, but the patterns and the reasoning structures, the tricks they use in the wrong answer choices, they repeat over and over and over. That means you can train for this like a sniper. You don't need luck. You need reps, strategy, and review. So let's break it down. Not all logical reasoning questions are created equal. Some show up every single test, others once in a blue moon. If you want results fast, go after the high-frequency, high-value question types first. These are the ones that build your foundation. I'm talking about necessary assumption, inference, and flaw. For necessary assumption, that's where the author's argument falls apart without the right answer. It must be true for their logic to work. You're looking for something that is subtle but essential. You can use the negation test here. If the answer is false, if you negated it, and the argument collapses, it is necessary. For inference questions, aka must-be-trues, you're looking for something that is based purely on the facts in the stimulus. No opinions, no guessing. You are proving an answer, not evaluating arguments. Your mindset here should be, what can I safely, logically conclude, and nothing more. For flaw questions, these are gold. They show up consistently, and if you learn the common flaws like circular reasoning, correlation versus causation, ad hominem, you'll spot them in seconds. If you master these 3, you're unlocking the lion's share of the section. Now, you also want to learn to spot the patterns in wrong answers. There are only about 5 types of wrong answers on the LSAT. They just wear different disguises. The first is where the choice is too strong. Here they are adding extreme language like always, never, must, and only if. They sound confident, but they're often overreaching. The second type is irrelevant, where it doesn't actually connect to the argument or the facts. It might sound smart, but it's off topic. The third is where the choice is the opposite of what it should be. These directly contradict the logic, or they flip cause and effect. The fourth are choices that are true, but they don't answer the question. And the LSAT loves these. It's a fact from the stimulus, but it doesn't actually do anything useful. The fifth category is out of scope. These bring in ideas that were never mentioned. They're tempting, but they are unsupported. So every time you do a logical reasoning question, especially when you get it wrong, ask yourself, which of the 5 tracks did I fall through? Write it down. Literally label the wrong answer type. You're not just doing questions here, you are training your brain to spot and reject garbage. Now, here's how most people study logical reasoning. They'll do a bunch of random questions from a practice test, review the answers, and move on. But that is a terrible way to build pattern recognition. Instead, you want to drill by type, like doing 10 necessary assumption questions in a row, then 10 flaw questions, then 10 inference questions. Why? Because repetition accelerates mastery. You learn to spot the structure, not just the surface. Then you use a timing count. You give yourself only 90 to 120 seconds per question in the beginning. Not 5 minutes, not till I figure it out. You are training here for timed decision making. And then after the fact, you want to force yourself to articulate the reasoning. Out loud or in writing, you'll say something like, I picked C because the author assumes that X causes Y. C is necessary because if X didn't cause Y, the argument would collapse. That one habit forces clarity and exposes shaky logic. Now, here's where serious students separate themselves. Most people review only their wrong answers. They'll skip over the ones they got right and then move on. But that's a mistake. Why? Because some of your right answers were lucky guesses, or they took 4 minutes to figure out, or they were based on bad reasoning. You just happened to choose the right answer. But every single logical reasoning question, right or wrong, should be reviewed for 3 things: confidence, timing, and reason. Confidence means, did you actually get why it was right, or were you unsure and you just guessed and got lucky? For timing, did it take you 60 to 90 seconds, or did it take you 4 to 5 minutes? As for reasoning, was your justification sound, or were you just hoping that it felt right? You'll be shocked by how much you can learn from the questions you almost missed and got lucky. Now, you want to use a tracking system that builds self-awareness during your review process. Ideally, you're going to use a spreadsheet, and if you're serious, you'll actually do this. You'll have columns for the question number, the question type, how long you spent, the answer you chose, the right answer, your confidence level, A, B, or C, why you got it wrong, and what trap you fall into. After doing 50 to 100 questions, you'll start seeing patterns. If you're always slow on inference questions, maybe you're overthinking it. If you're missing necessary assumption questions with strong wording, you're falling for choices that are too extreme. If you're getting flaws right, but doing them too slowly, you may understand the logic, but you need faster identification techniques. Now, once you've built skill in isolated drills, you've got to test yourself with mixed sets or full sections. You could do 10 or 15 random logical reasoning questions and time yourself, giving yourself maybe 20, 25 minutes max, and you're reviewing deeply, logging all the data, just like before, in your spreadsheet. This mimics real test conditions, but you've got to shift gears from necessary assumption to flaw to weaken, and so that's what you got to train for now. Now remember that logical reasoning is the engine of the LSAT, and now it is the LSAT more than any other section. It rewards deep thinking, pattern recognition, and precision under pressure. So you've got to train like a professional. Don't dabble, don't do random practice, build a system, track your thinking, and review every question. If you do this day in, day out, logical reasoning will stop feeling random. It'll start to feel predictable. You'll see the trap coming before you even finish the stimulus. And that's when the real confidence kicks in, when you go from reacting to the LSAT to controlling it. That's going to be how you win logical reasoning. It's going to be how you hit 170 plus, and it's how you separate yourself from every other applicant who's still wondering what went wrong. Now let's talk about the section everyone dreads but no one talks about enough: reading comprehension. Now, if you're like most students, this is the part of the LSAT you either skip over and hope it magically gets better, treat like a college reading assignment, or just accept defeat and pray for easy passages on test day. Now, let me tell you something I've learned after 20 years teaching the LSAT. Reading comp is the most misunderstood section on the entire test. Students think it's boring. They think it's untrainable. They say you either get it or you don't. That is completely wrong. Reading comp is absolutely trainable, but you can't approach it like a college student. You've got to approach it like a lawyer. In college, you read to absorb content. Professors want you to remember names, dates, details, citations, and that's what shows up on the test. But the LSAT doesn't care how much you remember. It's not testing your memory, it's testing your understanding. Now, here's how lawyers read. They look for argument structure. They separate opinion from fact. They notice when two sides disagree, even subtly, and they track how one paragraph builds on or challenges the previous one. And that is the skill set reading comp rewards. So the question is, how do you train that? Let's break it down. First, you've got to shift your goal. Your job is not to remember every detail. Your job instead is to understand, what is the author trying to say? Why are they saying it now? How do the parts of the passage fit together? And who disagrees? And about what? You're not just reading here, you're building a map of the passage. Now here's a drill you should do with every passage starting today. After each paragraph, stop and ask yourself 3 questions. First, what did that paragraph just do? Did it introduce a topic, present an argument, or offer a counterpoint? Second, how does it relate to the one before it? Does it support, expand, challenge, or shift? And third, what tone did it use? Is it objective? Is it biased? Is it skeptical? Or is it enthusiastic? Don't overthink it here. Just 1 sentence per answer. But force yourself to pause and process it before you move on. This one habit will prevent 90% of the rereading students do because they rushed through and then realized they had no clue what they just read. Now, most reading comp questions fall into a few predictable buckets. We want to learn to identify them instantly. First, main point. What is the core message here? Don't overthink it. Second question type is the author's attitude. Is it positive, negative, neutral, slightly skeptical? Word choice is key here. The third question type here is specific detail questions. You want to go back and find it. Don't rely on memory. Prove it with specific line citations from the passage. The fourth type here is inference questions. You're looking for what must be true based on the passage, not what could be true, what must be true. And finally, function questions. What was the purpose of this sentence or paragraph? Now here's the key. Each of these has its own strategy. For example, with inference questions, don't get seduced by choices that sound good. The answer must be provable directly from the text. If you can't point to the exact line, it is not a safe inference. Now with tone questions, look for adjectives and adverbs. That's where opinions hide. Words like surprisingly, merely, or innovative are tiny clues with big meaning. Now, a huge mistake students make is trying to hold the entire passage in their head. Please don't do that. You are not taking a memory test here. The passage is open book. Use it, but use it strategically. First, you've got to skim for structure, not facts. Get a sense of the flow and the argument here. You want to look for transition words like however, in contrast, or phrases like some scholars argue. These are markers of shifts. Second, you want to tag locations. You don't need to remember here what the second paragraph said about French law. You just need to know French law, paragraph 2, top half. That is enough to let you return fast. And finally, you want to read slower up front and faster later. The first paragraph usually frames the entire piece. Go slow and get clear. The later paragraphs are going to be where they add details or examples. So here, you can skim faster and come back as you need to. Now, starting off, you want to do untimed work. Untimed. Why? Because if you rush through without comprehension, you're just practicing bad habits. You'll get fast at failing. So your training plan is 3 phases. Phase 1, untimed, 1 passage at a time. Paragraph pause after each. Write a short summary at the end. Phase 2, is timed drills, one passage in 10 minutes. You build up your pacing without panicking. Then phase 3, full timed sections, 35 minutes, 4 passages, where you're simulating test day pressure and building your endurance. You want to track your results, not just whether you got it right or wrong, but did you run out of time? Did you misread the question? And did you forget where something was in the passage? That's where your points are hiding. Now, when you get something wrong, don't just say, I misread the question, because that tells you nothing. Instead, ask yourself, what was the trap in the wrong answer? Was it too extreme? Did it distort a viewpoint? Did it confuse the author's opinion with someone else's? And what made the right answer correct? Was it directly supported? Was it subtly neutral? Was it worded in a boring but accurate way? Reading comp is sneaky. The right answer will often sound dull, and the wrong answer will often sound exciting. And that is, of course, by design. Learn to trust boring. Now, reading comp is not about being a fast reader. It's about being a precise thinker under pressure. Every lawyer you admire, every law school professor, every Supreme Court clerk, they've trained this skill. They don't read faster than you. They just read more strategically than you. And now it's your turn. Don't avoid this section. Don't wait for it to click. Build it step by step, paragraph by paragraph. Because the moment you stop reading like a student and start reading like a lawyer, that's the moment your score starts climbing and your confidence follows. Now let's talk about timing. This is one of the most common complaints I hear from students. They'll say, I just run out of time, or I knew the answer, but I didn't have time to get to it. Or if I had just 5 more minutes, I would have crushed it. Sound familiar? Here's the truth. Timing problems are not just about getting faster. They're about how you train. Because if you think you'll magically get faster by cramming more practice tests, you're wrong. That's like showing up to the gym every day, randomly lifting weights, and hoping to get stronger with no program, no form, and no recovery. Time management on the LSAT is a skill. And, like any skill, it can be trained. But it's got to be trained progressively, not all at once. So let me walk you through how exactly to do just that. And this might sound counterintuitive, but it's one of the most important lessons I can give you. Speed is a function of mastery. If you try to go fast, before you know what you're doing, you're just going to make mistakes faster. You'll train bad habits, you'll build stress, and as a result, your score will stall. So start first by building accuracy without the clock. Learn how to spot assumptions, break down arguments, tag passage structure, all the stuff we've talked about so far before you ever start timing yourself. Once you start hitting at least 80% accuracy untimed, that's when you start adding pressure. Now here is the step-by-step structure I recommend. You want to follow this like a workout plan. Each phase builds on the one before it. Phase 1 is untimed accuracy work. Your goal here is to learn the method. So here, this is where you're taking your time, thinking through every question fully, and you're focusing on process over performance. Then we shift into phase 2 with lightly timed microsets. The goal here is to introduce a little pressure without the full stress of an entire section. So here, you might look to do 10 logical reasoning questions in 15 minutes, or in reading comp, you're doing one passage and the associated questions in about 12 minutes. This gets you used to watching the clock, but you've still got some breathing room to think. You're building decision speed, not rushing. Then finally, we pull it all together with full timed sections where you build your endurance and your real-time pacing. 35-minute sections, no breaks, no pausing, and here you're tracking everything. Where did you slow down? Where did you front-load your time and maybe rush the last few? And which questions took 3 minutes or more, and why? This phase is where most of your data comes from, and you'll start seeing the patterns, and those patterns are gold. Next, of course, we're phasing in full-length timed exams, 4 sections in a row with only a 10-minute break after section 2. These are 2 logical reasoning sections, 1 scored reading comp, and 1 unscored extra section of either reasoning or reading comp. The goal here, of course, is to simulate the real thing. Ideally, you're using LSAC's Law Hub platform, which is the only platform that replicates exactly what test day will be like with Prometric. Now, this phase is all about pressure, fatigue, and stamina. This is now a test of mental endurance, and so you want to know, can you stay sharp for 2.5 hours, and can you manage your energy and focus across 4 sections? If you can do that at least once a week, your brain will get used to it as well, and the stress will become normal, and that's where real confidence builds. So, yes, of course, you do want to start tracking your time after the accuracy phase, but never micromanage it question by question during practice. That creates unnecessary panic. Instead, you want to use a single countdown timer for each section, and if a question's dragging on beyond 2 minutes, flag it, mark it, and move on. Come back at the end if you have time. Now, most students spend too long on early questions, then panic at the end. Don't be that person. Your strategy should ideally be devoting equal attention to each question early, then making faster decisions midsection, and getting efficient at skipping if you ever risk getting bogged down or stuck. Now, most people time themselves and only record whether they finished on time or didn't finish at all. That, of course, is not that helpful. Instead, you want to track after each timed set how many questions were guesses due to time, which ones took more than 2 minutes, where did your focus drop, was it at the beginning, the middle, or the end, and which types consistently slow you down. Then label each issue. Was it a decision delay where you couldn't decide between 2 tempting answers? Was it a misread where you had to reread the stem or the stimulus? Were you overthinking things, spending time trying to make the answer choice fit the question? And were you second-guessing yourself where you changed your answer from the right one to the wrong one? Those are all patterns, and once you see them, you can fix them. Now, you want to practice making faster decisions, not just reading faster. This is a subtle but important distinction. Most students think timing means reading faster, but it doesn't. It means processing information more efficiently and cutting wasted motion. You're not training here for a speed reading contest. You're training to identify which part of the stimulus matters most, what the question is really asking, and which choices can be eliminated immediately. That's what gets you faster, not trying to read the whole thing in record time. Now, of course, you will get stuck at times, you will mismanage time occasionally, and that's fine. The key is, can you recover when you make those mistakes? Practice skipping, practice flagging, and practice finishing strong even when you hit a wall mid-section. Success on the LSAT is not about perfect pacing. It's about adaptability under stress. Of course, timing is not just about the clock, it's about control. You're learning how to make fast, confident decisions under pressure, which, by the way, is what lawyers do every single day. So train that skill deliberately. Don't just hope to get faster. Build the systems that make speed inevitable. That's how you go from, I ran out of time again, to, I had 2 minutes left, reviewed 3 guesses, and caught 1 mistake before time was up. That is a different game. And once you start playing it, your score will reflect it. Now let's get something out of the way. If your entire LSAT prep strategy is just taking more practice tests and checking the answer key, you're not actually studying. You're just performing for a score and hoping it magically gets better. Review is where the real gains happen. And I'm not talking about the lazy review that 90% of students do, where they say, I got number 14 wrong, the right answer was C, cool, moving on. That's not review. That's checking the answer and walking away just as confused as before. Real review is deeper, it's slower, and it's more uncomfortable. But it's also what separates students who improve from students who plateau at the same score for months. So let's go step by step. Here is exactly how to review your work like a high scorer. Of course, obviously, you want to review the questions you got wrong, but that's not enough. You've also got to review the ones you guessed on, the ones you got right but weren't sure why, the ones you spent way too long on, and the ones where you changed your answer last minute. Why? Because each of those represents a gap, a blind spot, a source of avoidable point loss. So don't just focus on the red X's, focus on every sign of uncertainty or inefficiency. Now, most students will stop at, I picked B, it was D, oh well. You've got to ask a deeper set of questions. Why did I choose my answer? Be specific here. What did you think it meant? What part of the stimulus or the passage made you feel confident? Then ask, why is that answer actually wrong? Is it too strong? Is it irrelevant? Does it misrepresent the argument? Next, you want to ask, why is the right answer right? And how was it better than what I chose? Does it fix a gap that I missed? Is it more tightly worded? And did I overlook a key line? Finally, what kind of trap did I fall for? This is huge because the LSAT repeats its traps. The sooner you can name them, the sooner you can avoid them. Now, you want to create a mistake tracker that actually works so you can log all of this data. You don't need any fancy software for this or an app. You could use Google Sheets or a notebook and make the following columns: the prep test number and section, the question number, what you chose, the right answer, your confidence level, the time that you devoted to that question under timed conditions, the type of mistake that you made, and the lesson learned. This is not just for accountability, it's how you spot patterns. You'll start seeing things like, I always miss necessary assumptions when I rush, or I fall for strong language in inference questions, or I misinterpret accept questions when I'm tired. Once you know your patterns, you can fix them. Now, a lot of students treat the review process like a courtroom. They're saying, see, I was kind of right. I just misread one word, or I almost picked the right one, or this question was just badly written. Stop. You are not here to prove that your logic was close. You're here to eliminate errors. So instead of defending your reasoning, dismantle it and deconstruct it. Get curious and get ruthless. Ask yourself, what did I assume that wasn't actually justified? How can I catch this mistake before it happens again? And if I had to teach this question to someone else, what would I say? That last one is gold. If you can explain the reasoning behind the right answer clearly to someone else, you own that question type. Now, here's the real secret to high scores. Your review isn't just about the questions you've already done. It's about improving every future question you'll ever do. So after every review session, write down 1 or 2 key takeaways and translate them into action. For example, your takeaway might be, slow down on flaw questions and underline the conclusion. Or, when a choice has extreme wording, double check the passage. Or, I'm going to drill parallel reasoning twice this week with a 90-second timer. That is your game plan for tomorrow. If you review without applying anything new, you're wasting time. Now, a lot of people review once and never look back. Please don't do that. Once a week, open your mistake log and redo the questions without looking at your past answers. Ask yourself, do I remember the trap? Can I articulate the reasoning now? And did I fix the problem that caused this miss? That is how you track progress. And that's how you'll know if you're actually learning or just spinning your wheels. Of course, you don't need a class or a tutor for this, but reviewing with someone else can 10x your understanding. Why? Because explaining your reasoning forces clarity, and hearing someone else's approach helps you see blind spots. Even just one session a week can change the game. If you can teach it, that proves you've learned it. Now, the best LSAT students aren't the ones who score the highest on their first practice tests. They're the ones who review the most ruthlessly, because that's where the score gains are hiding, not in taking more tests, not in rewatching explanation videos, but in slowing down, asking the uncomfortable questions, and using every mistake as a lesson. Review is not a punishment. It is your unfair advantage. If you do it right, you won't just improve, you'll start to feel unstoppable. And when that happens, the LSAT stops feeling like a mysterious, unpredictable monster and starts feeling like a game that you know how to win. Let's talk about what happens after test day, and I want you to pay attention because this is where most students lose their edge. You take the LSAT in August or September, you survive the stress, you close your laptop, maybe you cry, maybe you celebrate. Either way, what do most students do next? They wait. They say, okay, I'll relax for a few weeks while I wait for my score. And just like that, they waste one of the most valuable windows of the entire law school admissions process. I don't want you to be one of those people, because the time after your LSAT and before your score comes back is one of the most important opportunities you have. You'll tell yourself, I'll work on my personal statement once I know my score. Or, if I don't get the score I want, I might not apply this cycle, so I'll hold off. Wrong move, because while you wait, guess what's happening? Other students are finalizing their apps. Personal statements are being edited and re-edited. Letters of rec are getting requested and written, and applications are getting sent in. By the time you finally get your score and start your application process, you're already behind. The best applicants, the ones who submit in September and early October, they don't wait. They use the lag time to get everything else ready so that when the score drops, they're ready to hit submit the next day. Let me remind you, law schools start reviewing applications as soon as they open, typically in September. That means your window isn't after your score comes back. Your window is now, right after you finish the test. Even if you're not totally sure that you're going to apply this cycle, or maybe you're going to retake in October, you should still be working on everything else. Because when things go well and you get the score you need, you'll want to be ready. And if they don't go well, you'll still be ahead of schedule for the next LSAT or the next cycle. It's a no-lose situation. So use that 2 to 3 week waiting period to prep every part of your application. For your personal statement, you want to start with a brain dump. Think about what is your why law story. Draft a messy version first. Don't edit as you write. Then get feedback from 1 or 2 trusted people and rework the structure. Make sure you're showing, not telling, and aim to have a clean draft ready to go when scores drop. For your resume, trim it down to 1 page. Even if you have a decade of experience, it's got to be reduced to 1 page, and make it law school format with academics first, not a job application format. You want to emphasize intellectual and leadership roles, not just your job titles, and use bullet points with impact. Show the outcomes of what you did, not the responsibilities that you had. You also have the opportunity to write an adversity statement, formerly called diversity statement, which is optional but powerful. If you come from some unique background, community, or identity, write about it, talk about it. Even though it's not required, it still is a chance to show depth, values, and perspective. But keep it focused, keep it short. This is not your entire life story. It is meant to be a focused narrative with a purpose. For your addenda, this is where you can address red flags, where you explain them, but don't excuse them. If you have an issue with your GPA, a gap in your transcript, if you had several LSAT test cancellations, write a short, factual addendum, but don't be overly defensive in it. Own the issue, whatever happened, explain briefly, and then pivot to how you've grown and end on a positive note. For your letters of rec, the earlier that you request them, the better. Now is not too early to start. Professors, supervisors, anyone who can speak to your critical thinking, leadership, or intellectual ability, and of course, give them plenty of notice. Help them out by offering to provide a list of bullet points or talking points that can help them write a stronger, more detail-oriented letter. Of course, don't wait till later. Don't wait to ask for it until your scores already come back. You'll look rushed, and your recommenders will feel that urgency. Finally, start researching schools now so that you know where you are likely to apply based on your GPA and your predicted LSAT score. Build a list of reach schools, target schools, and safety schools. Reach numbers are where you are a little bit below the medians, but you might get lucky. Target schools are where your LSAT and GPA are on point, right around their medians, and safety schools are where you are above their medians and you're likely to get in, maybe even with scholarship money. Of course, do your homework, read their ABA 509 reports, know what the median LSAT is, the median GPA, and of course, scholarship data. And start mapping out why our school essays, even if they're optional, they're always a good idea to write because schools, of course, practice yield protection. They want to admit students who are likely to say yes if they are accepted. Now, your goal should be to send in your applications within 48 hours of score release maxed. That is the golden move, but it's only possible if you do everything I just shared before your score comes back. Now think about it. While other people are posting on Reddit, refreshing LSAC, texting their friends, and wondering what to do next, you're uploading your essays, you're reviewing your application one last time, and you're hitting submit. While they're reacting, you're moving. That alone can put you 3 to 4 weeks ahead of thousands of other applicants. And that's what leads to early admits, priority scholarship consideration, less stress, and more control. Now, of course, we've got to be real. Sometimes your LSAT score won't come back the way you wanted, but you've still won because now your application is almost complete and you can retake the LSAT in October or November with minimal disruption. And you've already thought through your narrative for your application, so you're not scrambling, you're just making minor adjustments. At that point, most people panic and waste another cycle because they just weren't even close to ready. But you're going to be prepared either way. Of course, you can't control when your LSAT score comes back, but you do control how you use the time while you wait. So don't treat this window like a vacation. Treat it like your secret weapon, because when that score drops and you've already got a polished personal statement, a tight resume, and your whole app is ready to go, you don't just apply early, you apply like a pro. You apply like someone who gets in with a scholarship, like someone who planned to win. And that is exactly what will happen. You're not just prepping for a test, you're building the habits that define how you'll show up as a law student, as a lawyer, and as a professional. No one is coming to save you. No one's going to tell you exactly what to do every day. It's on you to take control, to prepare like it matters, because it does. If you show me how you study for the LSAT, I'll show you how you handle your career. So if you're serious, it's time to prove it. Not with talk, not with plans, but with what you do next.